Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Java Programming, our week 4. If you are accessing this video on YouTube, this is a course taught on coolchat.com. So you can visit coolchat.com to access the course content. So on coolchat.com, if you go to Information Technology Courses, under Courses Information Technology, and you click, you will access the Java course, or if it's among the popular courses on the front page, you can still access it on the front page. So once you click and you land on this course page, so under courses information technology, so when you click, the list of courses is there, so you just choose Java programming. So week 4, what are we going to study for week 4? We are going to consider making decision. So we consider the if statements. Then we also consider the if else statement. Then we consider the equivalency operator to check if something is equal to or equivalent. Then we also see nested if, that's if in an if statement, else if statement. Then we also see the logical AND and OR operator. So how we use AND, the AND and OR operator. Then we also see the switch statements. Then we also see the conditional and not operators as well. So let's get started. Okay. So the introduction of topic of this course. If you are in Africa, you use mobile money. So that's a practical example of how conditional statement works. So if you use mobile money and you dial your mobile money network, I'm currently having MTN. So if I dial star 170 hash, if I dial it, it gives me the mobile money services. So on the mobile money, there are options. Like option 1, it says transfer money. Option 2, it says Momo Pay and Pay Bill. Option 3 says airtime and bundles. Option 4 says allow cash out. Option 5 says financial services. And option 6 says my wallet. Okay, so these are the options that are presented to you as a user. Now, as a programmer, you are supposed to write code under each of these options. So this topic that we are going to consider is the first way of implementing these options. So if a user entered 1, then you should know, you should write the code so that it knows that it says transfer mobile money. So you implement the code for transferring mobile money. And if the user enters 2, then you should know if the user wants to do Momo Pay and Pay Bill. So you implement the code for Momo Pay and Pay Bill. And if the user enters 3, then you should know the user wanted to do the function for airtime and bundles. So you implement the method for that. Then if the user enters 4, you should know the user wanted allow cash out. So before the withdrawal request, when the user enters 4, then it allows the merchant to, or it allows the bill prompt to be sent to the user so that the user can allow cash out. So you implement that code for that. If the user has chosen 4, then if the user chooses 5, then you implement the code for financial services, the option 5. And if the user chooses 6, you implement the code for the my wallet section. Okay, so this feature of the application is what we are going to see how you do that as a programmer. Okay, So now after 6, there is no 7. So what happens if the user enters 7? That one too, we are going to see it if the option which we listed is the user enters something else. Then we'll also see that example. So I'm going to teach you with this course content. Then after that, in this video, which is not part of the course content, then we will implement a small logic for this one, but we are not going to implement the actual methods. We are just going to, when the user choose, for example, 1, we just write transfer money option chosen. Then 2, Momo pay and pay bill selected or something or choose. Then 3, airtime and bundle selected. Then 4, allow cash out or implement allow cash out. Okay, so we do it implement allow cash out so that we know that in that part of code, if you are the actual programmer, then you have to code or write a function to do that if a user choose that option. Okay, but for the implementation is not part of this course. The course is to use the if conditions to know which options have been chosen. Okay, so that's what we call the making decisions. So you have to decide what to do at every option that the user selects. So that's the topic, and this is a practical example I can give you for this topic. So if you are from Africa and you use mobile money, just dial that number, then you see the options. So after teaching this part of the lesson, then you also implement what you see on the screen. So you list the options and the user choose, then all you need to write it down. Just display on the screen, implement if the user choose, for example, 1 for mobile MTN mobile money for 1, then you just write implement transfer money. If the user choose 2, then you just write implement Momo pay and pay bill functionality or something. Okay, so that's it. So I'm going to zoom the page so that you can see it clearer as I explain the content. Okay, so like I have explained, so that's conditional statement. So in Java, the simplest statement you can use to make a decision is the if statement. For example, suppose you have declared an integer variable name quiz score. So if you declared an integer value like int quiz score, and you want to display a message when the value of score is 10. So maybe in your application you want to display a message if the value of the quiz score is 10, then the following if statement makes the decision to produce the output. Okay, so when you are checking the if statement, you compare it to something. So what you are comparing it comes at the left side. Then the one you are comparing to comes at the right hand side. Then you have your if statement over here. So you write if, then the comparator goes in between the two brackets. Okay, so later on we see all the options for comparison in the next slide. But this example says that maybe you want to check if the score is 10. So this is a statement. So the double equal to, remember it's double equal to. If you make it a single equal to, it will always be true. So it will be going through the code because it will assign 10 to the quiz score. So always make sure that when you are doing comparison, it is double equal to. What did I say? It's supposed to be what? Double equal to. Remember that because those are the programming challenges or errors we may encounter with some code we write. We don't expect it to work. It will be working. Then we wonder where the problem is coming from. So these are some of the things that programmers normally encounter. They may spend the entire day to figure it out. That's why I'm stressing it. For comparison, it is double equal to. Don't write a single equal to. If you write a single equal to, it's going to be true because it will just assign 10 to the quiz score or whatever you put here. If you use a single equal to, whatever you put here will be assigned over here. So it will always be true. So remember, for the comparator is double equal to. So this summarize it. So system.print ln, we've seen print ln, we know that it displays an information on the screen. So this is if the score is 10, we just display on the screen the score is perfect. Okay, the score is perfect. So this is the pictorial of the example. So when we have if, it's either true or false. So if the condition is true, then the code you write will be executed. If the condition is false, the code you write will not be executed. Okay. Then later on we see the else if. So in the case of the else if the top condition is false, then it moves to the next else if condition. Then if that one too is false, it moves to the next else if condition. If that one too is false, it moves to the next if condition until we get to the last part, which we normally call the else. So the else means that if all the ones at the top is false, then you run that part of code. Okay, so what you should know is that if the condition is true, before the code you write will be executed. If it's false, it will not write it. It will not run it. So in case you are using two comparator, whether it is true or false, if it is true, that code that you write will be implemented. If it is not true, then where you put the else, that code will also be implemented. So here, when the program runs, it checks the value of 10 to the quiz, the value on the memory for quiz score. So it compares it. So is it equal to 10? That's the question. So if it is true, then it comes here, then it outputs the score is perfect, because that's the sentence that we wrote. We wrote the sentence that it should display this on the screen, so it will display if the condition is true. But if the condition is false, then nothing happens, then it just continue with your code. So first it checks, because we are comparing, so it checks if the value on the memory is equal to the one you are comparing to. So if it's the same, it is true, so it will come to run your code that you write. If it is false, it just continue with the code. Okay, so this is just an example. So you, the programmer, based on what you are doing and what you write over there. So these are the comparators which you need to familiarize yourself with. Like I've said earlier on, equal to, if you are checking if something is equal to, we use the two equal to sign. Two, remember, I'm saying it again, two equal to sign. If it is not, if you want to check if something is not equal to, then use the exclamation, then equal to. So exclamation and equal to is, you are checking if it is not equal to. If you are checking if something is not equal to something, then you use the exclamation mark equal to. And if you are checking if something is less than, okay, so what you have here at the left hand side is less than what you have at the right hand side, then you use the less than sign. If you want to check if it's less than or equal to, remember, less than or equal, this one is the same, to comparing two things at the same time. So if it tests if this one is less than, then it should be true, or alternatively, if it's equal to, then that one will also be true. So, or it can be any one of them. If any one of them is true, then everything is true. So if you want to check something is less than or equal to, then we use this one. Then if you want to check if something is greater than, then we use this operator. Then if you want to check if something is greater than or equal to, then we use this operator. Now if you want to check if something, two alternatives, like whether the left comparison is true, or what's at the right, or the subsequent ones are true, then use the OR operator. So with the OR operator, if any of them is true, then the entire condition is going to be true, because you say OR, so one of them, at least one of them. So if at least one of them is true, the entire condition is going to be true. Then the end check if the ones you have, both of them, or if there are three ends, then all of them. So for the end, all the conditions must be true before the entire condition will be true. If one of them is false, then everything is false. So that's normally what we use the AND for. So AND is multiple conditions that you want them to be true in order to run a line of code. Then you use the AND. But for the OR, at least if one of them is true, the code that you write will be executed. But for the AND, all the ones you listed as AND, they all must be true before your code will be executed. So like I explained, we have the else if. So the else if start from the top. The top one, the first one is if. So you check the top condition. If the top condition is false, then it moves to the next else if it is false. Okay. So this is just two comparison. So you check this one. If it is true, you execute your line of code. Else, if it is not true, then you execute your line of code. Okay. So in this one, our syntax is just a single line. So there is no curly brackets to contain our block of code. Okay. But in the actual code where you have many codes, it is appropriate to put a curly bracket so you know where your condition starts and where it ends. Okay. But because this is just single line, so it didn't bring the curly bracket. But you can bring it. It will not make any difference. But for you to be able to follow your code, it's appropriate for you to bring the curly bracket so you know where the opening statement starts and where the statement ended. Okay. So the else, if the top one is false, before the else will run. Because if this one is true, then you run what I put here. If it is not true, which goes to the else, then you run what I put there. So in this case, if the score is 10, it will display on the screen, the score is perfect. Else, which means anything other than 10, it will display no, it's not. No, it's not. Okay. So for the else, is if it's the top one is false before what you put in the else statement to run. So that's how like you see there. So you check is 10 is what I put at the right is 10. So what the value I have in the memory for quiz score, is it 10? If it is 10, then it is true. So it will output what you put over here. The score is perfect. Now, if the value I have in the memory for quiz score, it is not 10, then false is now it's at the false side, which is the else side. So it will output no, it's not. Okay, so that's basically what it is. So we'll look at the else if, then we will implement the mobile money feature, which is not this page content. This one we use a different example, but we implement the mobile money, then we continue this example. Okay. So the else if structure compares more than. Okay. So the else is compares more than 2. So for 2 we have else and else. We have if and else. So this is for 2. If and else, 2 alternatives. So if it's not this one, then it's that one. So you write the block of code. So else, if and else, that's for 2 comparison. But for multiple comparison, then we have the else in between them. The last one will be else. So we start with the top comparison. So the top one starts with if. Okay. Now if the top one is false, it moves to the next else if. Now if that one too is false, it moves to the next else if. So it continues. Then if none of the above, so all the above they are false. If all of them are false, then it runs the last part, which is the else. So it runs the else part of the code. So else part of the code is if the top comparisons are all false, then it will run the last part of your code. Okay. So now we are going to implement the mobile money option. So we ask the user to enter the options or enter the options. So if the user enters any of the options, then we use the if condition to display the implementation we are going to implement. Okay. Now, if the user enters anything other than the options we've given the user, then we just enter that it is invalid option. So here, the invalid option is going to be in the else because if all the option values is none. Okay. The user didn't choose any of the top options, then we just display it. on the screen that invalid option selected or invalid option. Okay. So let's create a new, then we can use it for this example. So new Java project. Okay, so I'm going to call it book 4. Don't create this model. Don't create. So in your else housing, just new then class. So in the class we will need a public static void main because that's where we put our code. So we take the public static void main and we keep the class name. So our class is going to be, remember, like I've said in the previous week, classes begins with capital letters. So the end is capital. Then we click on finish. Declare a variable for the option. That's to declaring a variable, like I said, it reserves a space before you ask the user to enter the option. You need to reserve a space on the memory so that when we take the option from the user, the data from the user, we store it over there. So that's what we need to do. And the option is going to be integer because the user is going to enter integer values. So we have int option. Okay. Now because we'll be taking the option from the user and we are going to use a scanner class, we need to import our scanner class. So you write at the top of the class import Java dot pixel scan. Okay, let's see, can zoom this. That's the right. Okay, so int up. So I'm zooming the code so that you can see it clearer. So control plus plus. So that's the highest. Control plus plus. So we declare the variable the input from the user is an integer, so the data type is supposed to be int. Then you're giving it a name to be option. Now when we take it from the user, we need to store that value, so we need to reserve a space on the memory. That's why we declare this. Now we need a scanner class in order to get the value from the user from the console. So the scanner class needs this class which is in this path. So java.util then .scanner. Now once we've imported it, we can create objects. We can create objects of the scanner class. So scanner, get a name. I can call it in. Is equal to new scanner. Our scanner takes in system dot in. Okay. So now first we need to tell the user that he should enter, or we list all the options available so the user knows which option to select. So we have system dot out dot inside. So we list to select or enter option. So we are going to list all the options. So press dial your mobile money short code. Okay, as I'm going to diamond, so I can list all the possible value. So we list it before the user choose, so that the user know the ones that he wants, so that he can choose. For the MTN, we have 6 options, so you can just paste. So you just change the content of it. So option 1. Okay, so it says menu. So here the MTN didn't they make it so menu top. Alright. Then option 1 have it 1 slash, which is transfer money. Then option 2. Option 2 was option 2 was Momo Pay and Pay. Option 3. Option 3 was Welcome from option 4. Option 4 is allow cash out. And option 5 is financial services. Financial services. And option 6 is my wallet. Option 6. Wallet. So this is just to inform the user the options available. So the next step is to get the inputs or the option the user chooses. Then we use the if condition to check which of the options the user has selected. So I'm going to run this. You can see the outcome. Okay, so as you can see, we have menu. Okay, so we need then option 1 transfer money, then option 2 now to option 2 Momo Pay and Paygo. Option 3 is airtime bundle. Option 4 is allow capital. Option 5 is financial service. Option 6 is my wallet. Okay. So now we have to get the value the user will enter. We know how to get the value. So we call our subjects. Okay. So what goes on the left hand side is the memory name, where we want to store the option the user is going to enter, and the memory name we're giving that name to the option. Okay, so we have option is equal to our scanner object. So in dot our the data type for our memory name at the left is of the type int. The method we need to call is next int. Next int. So that stores the value on the memory. Next int. Okay. So this stores the value on the memory. So now we have to implement today's lesson, the if statement. So we have to check if this option is the option the user select is 2, the option the user select is 3, the option the user select is 4, the option the user select is 5, the option the user select is 6, or the user entered any other one. So this one will be if, this one will be else if, this one will be else if, this one will be else if, this will be else if, and this one will be else if. Then any other is going to be in the else. Okay, because none of the above, then we implement the code for the else. So simple code. So we start with if, then the one we are checking. So then, like I told you, it's supposed to be double equal to operator. If I single one, this line of code, block of code, what we put there will be executed, because it's going to assign the value you put at the right hand side to the memory name. So the memory name you have, or on the memory you have that value assigned. So always remember, it's supposed to be double rotation. So we have double. So we check if it's 1. Okay. So now we check if the value on this memory by this name option is 1. So if it's the value is 1, we'll block of code. So if you are the programmer implementing this functionality, then you in this option, in this part, you write the block of code to implement that functionality. But that's not part of what we are doing. We are only doing the if and else part. So we just display on the screen system.out. Okay. So we say implement transfer money functionality. So you, the programmer, you put the block of code to do that particular task over here. But this just to display that the functionality for transferring money code. So all the other options will be else if just copy. So we have else, then we have if. Okay. So here is going to be option 2. And option 2 says what? Implement Momo pay bill. Okay, functionality. That's for option 2. So we can copy this one for option 3. So option 3 is supposed to implement airtime. So option 3 is implement airtime. Bundles functionality. Come to option 4. See if the option is 4. Implement allow cash out functionality. Allow cash out functionality. So else if it is 5. It's 5. Financial services. So if it is 6. Implement and wallet functionality. So if you are using different mobile money, you follow yours to implement yours. So implement my wallet functionality. Now if user enter the above, then it will be in the else. So else you will display on the screen invalid option. Okay, so system dot out. So you can as well test the error message it gives you. If you haven't put option, then you can display that message. But I'm going to display invalid option. So I'm going to run it. Okay, so this is the first, like all the else if. The first one starts with if. So check if what is on the memory for this option, which is a memory we declared on the declared. So this memory space, we got the value from the user. So the value has been put on that memory. So we check if the value on the memory is equal to 1. So we said that equal to, we use a double operator. So if the value on the memory is equal to 1, then this block of code is going to be executed. So we are just printing the screen alerts that we are going to implement this transfer money. So if you are the programmer, you put your code for transfer money between here, or you can write a function and call the function over here. So it will execute that functionality. Then if the user selects true, then you implement MomoPay. Then so you can create a function, you call the function here, so it will execute that functionality. Then if the user chooses 3, it's the same. You can implement it by putting the code here, or you can create a function and do the implementation and call the function here. So the block of code will also be executed before the save is 6. So if user didn't enter anything, you get display invalid option. So we are going to test this. Okay, so I'm going to enter my option. So I'm going to choose 5. Okay, so as you can see, it says implement what? Implement financial asset with this functionality. So I'm going to run it and choose 7, which you see the message I'm going to get. Okay, so I'm going to enter 7. Okay, so like you see, it says invalid option. Okay, so that's it for the if, else if, and the last one being else. Okay, so since I've use this one as an example in the lecture notes, I'm just going to explain. So we are not going to code because the same concept. So I've used the mobile money for coding. So if you are using different mobile money, please dial your short code and use it to implement this functionality. So you give all the options. So if the user chooses that option, then you display implement that kind of functionality. So in the implementation, if you are the one coding, you can write a function. So in between your curly bracket, you can call the function. So the function will execute what you want to implement when the user chooses that option. Or you can write the entire code in these curly brackets. It will also continue. So in this example, it says you should implement a grading system. So in the grading system, from 80 and above, it is A. From 75 to 79, it is B plus. From 70 to 74, it is B. From 65 to 69, it is C plus. From 60 to 64, it's C. And from 55 to 59, it is D plus. And 50 to 54 is D. Then below 50 is 50 is E. So in this school they don't have fail, so the E is for fail. So in this example, you normally use the lower class boundary, so the lower part. The rest will be greater than. So we start that if we get the score, we can call it score. So we get the score from the user. So before getting the value, you know the concept. You need to create a space on the memory. So you need to declare an integer value, or not integer because the score can be decimal. So you declare the double data type variable, and that there will be space reserved on the space. So when you get the input from the user, you put that value over there. And the next step is to compare the value inside the memory. If it is 80 and above, then you just display grade A. If it is 75 and above, so since it starts from the top, so 80 and above, 80 for example, so 80 and above, you need to use either greater than or equal to. So if it's greater than or equal to 80, that part of code that we write will be executed. If false, then you move to the next checking. So next checking will be, we check if it is 75 and above, then it will be B plus. Then if that one fails, it moves to the next checking. So if that checking also fails, it moves to the third one, fourth, and so on. Okay, so as you can see, and the last one, this one will be else. So all these ones will be, this one will be if, then else if, else if, else if, else if, else if, else if, then the last one is going to be else. So if it's none of the above, then we display what's the last option. Okay, so this is the code. As you can see, we imported our java.tutor because we are going to get the input from the user. So in this example, it used int score, but the appropriate data type for the score should be double so that you can take decimals as well. Because someone may get half of a mark because of bonus or close to the mark, so the lecturer may decide not to give the full mark. So you should use the score as double, declare the score as double. But anyway, any of them was just that if you declare int and the person enters a decimal number, it's going to cut that part of the decimal part, so it's not going to be so accurate. Okay, so we get the so this one declare the scanner object, gets the score from the user, and sometimes it may skip the console. It may skip it. So if it skip, you just call it this one so that when it skip, it just but even if your this thing is not skipping, you don't need this part of the code. So then we check if our score is greater than or equal to 80, we just display A. If it's greater than or equal to 75, we just display B plus. If it's greater than or equal to 70, B, and so on. So like all the boundaries we have there, that's what we are using over here. So 80 and above, we display this one. 75 and above, we display this one. 70 and above, we display this one. 65 and above, we display this one. 60 and above, we display this one. 55 and above, we display this one. 50 and above, we display this one. Any other 10 which is below 50, so we display it. Okay, so you can as well modify the code so that in the program where you don't want the user to enter more than 100. Okay, so if you don't want the user to enter more than 100, so you write that score cannot be more than 100 if user enters more than 100. Now, if user enters a negative value, you should also write that score cannot be negative. So you modify this code and add those condition comparators. So if it's more than 100, you just display to the user that score cannot be more than 100. If it is negative, you just display to the user that score cannot be negative. Of course, even though there is a possibility that score can be negative, especially maybe there's exam or parties that the person didn't score anything at all, and the lecturer may give the person negative so that the other scores during the accumulation, it will drop the score, the total score of the student. But if you want to make it very straight, you can also modify this code so that if it's negative, which has been entered, it will tell the user that score cannot be negative. Then if it's more than 100, you tell the score cannot be more than 100. So you try to do that. If you are having an issue, you can just contact me. But I believe you can do it. Just that you start from, instead of 80, you start from 100 and above. So, but that one, the 100 is not included, so you use greater than. So you don't use equal to. If you use score greater than or equal to 100, it means 100, no one can get 100, which is less than a person can get 100. So you just write if score is greater than 100, then you display your information. Then else, then you start with the 80 and above and so on. Okay. So in this else too. So in this else too, you check if it is less than 0. So if it's less than 0, you also display the result. Then else, which else means it is not less than 0, but it is also less than 50. Then you display your grade, which is the E. So try to implement it. If you have any issue, you just contact. So now we are on the nested if. So nested if is just an if in another if statement. So if you put an if in another if, it's just called nested if. Okay. So in the nested if, in the example that we did, in the implementation, you may also have another if in the if statement in all the options you have, probably. So maybe there may be another option, like maybe there may be another selection from the user. Maybe there's something they have multiple, another selection. So that one, we may also have another if statement inside them. Once the user select the option, there may be another if statement. It also show another options for the user to choose. Okay, so an if in another if statement is called nested if statement. Okay, so in this pictorial example, it says, for example, suppose you want to pay 50 Ghana cedis bonus to a salesperson only if the salesperson sells at least 3 items. That is at least 1,000 Ghana cedis. So if you sell 1,000 Ghana cedis and it is not 3 items, or it's not 3 or above items, you will not get the bonus. The condition is that you should sell 3 items, and the total amount of the 3 items of things you sold, it should be more than or equal to 1,000 Ghana. So at least means like that same value or more. So in that logic, we check if the item sold is more than or equal to 3. So that's what the first logic. Okay. Now if it is true, we do another nested if. Then we check if the total amount of the sales is greater than or equal to 1,000 Ghana. So if it is, then we will display on the screen that you've qualified for a bonus of 50 Ghana. So else means first else. So if the first option is false, then we just display you are not qualified. Now, if even the person sells 3 items and they're doing the second validation and we check the amount, and the amount is not 1,000 or more, it goes to this false side. So we also display that you are not qualified for the bonus. Okay, so that's the code. So that's the code. So since you'll be taking the input from the user, you just import your scanner class. Then you declare your variables. Now we use a final because they are constants, because those values doesn't change. So you can use them, but you can as well just add code those values there, but you can also declare to them as constant. So you know how to, in the previous week we talked about how to declare constant. So you use a final keyword, so that, and the other part of the code you can't change this value. That's the motive of the constant. Once you initialize the constant variable, you cannot change the value in the later part of your code. So we declared most often in the programming ethic, constants are given capital letters so that to differentiate them from the other variables. That's why we have capital letters over here. So you have final int min item. So this is for minimum items the person is supposed to sell, and this is the minimum value of the 3 items. 3 or more items should be 1,000 or more. So this is the value, and this is the bonus. The sales bonus is 50 Ghana cedis, so 50. Then the amount you get from the user, you have to declare it. Then the items the user has sold, you need to declare it. The items the user has sold is integer, but you enter 1, 2, 3, and so on. So that's going to be integer, but the amount is going to be double because there can be point something. So the amount we may have point something, especially point something normally goes for the first words. Okay, so maybe 50 cedis, then maybe some 25 pesos or something. So the pesos goes to the decimal part. So we have our double over there. Okay. So now you declare your variables to reserve the space on the memory. These are constant which are fixed values, so it will not change. You can't change in the later part of the code. Once you reserve the space, then you can declare your scanner object, then take the input from the user, then store it at the appropriate places. So first we write to the screen, please enter the total items sold. Then we get our input from the user. So once we've gotten that input from the user, we check if the items sold is 3 or more. So we check items which are with the number of items sold which we got from the user. We check if it is more than equal to our minimum items, which we've set the value here to already to be correct. Okay, so we check if the items is 3 or more. Now if it is not, we put it in the else. So if it is not, you are not qualified for a bonus. Now if it is 3 or more, we do another nested if. We do another if to check if the amount is 1,000 or more. So now we ask the user to enter the amount of the total amount of the item sold. Okay. So the user will enter. Then we also check if that amount is greater than or equal to our minimum value we expect, which is 1,000. We've already assigned the constant. So if it is more or equal to, then we display, you have a bonus of DHE. The sales bonus, we set it to be 50. So 50 will be displayed over here. So else, then you are not qualified for a bonus. So even if you sell 4 items, 5 items, but your total amount of sales is less than 1,000 Ghana, then you are not qualified for a bonus. Okay. So this example is a nested if. So an if statement in another if statement. That's why we call it nested. Nested is something inside something. Okay. Basically that's it. Then finally we are using the switch statement. So the switch statement is also a conditional statement similar to the if statement. Just that it is written a different way. So the general syntax. This is an example of this one, the year. So this one displays the student class year based on a stored number. So you enter your year. So if your year is year 1, so you are a freshman. If your year is year 2, you are sophomore. If your year is year 3, you are junior. If your year is 4, you are senior. Then if someone enters any other than these values, then invalid here. Okay, so that's an example of the if statement we write for this part of your code. Now, if you want to implement this one in the switch, you can implement the same thing in the switch. So this one is if statement. Okay. Now, if you want to implement the same, so also for practice sake, you can code this one. Even though we are not going to code, we are going to use the switch statement to code this one. You can use the if statement to code. So the code is already here. Just that you ask the user to enter the year before you start with the if statement. Okay. So this one, since they are just one line of code, they didn't bring the curly bracket. So, but you can put your syntax in the curly bracket as well. Okay. Then the else if I've written the if is below here, you can as well bring them. They all the same. So you can bring this or bring them all of the same. And they also do the same thing. So you don't get syntax for that. So we are going to write our switch. Okay. So the switch has a rule. So it says switch starts the structure and is followed by a text expression enclosed in parentheses. Okay. So you need to test you have a text expression in the switch. Okay. So the keyword start the keyword switch and the text expression. So what you are going to use to test. Okay. Sometimes it can be a variable. So if you want to test a value stored on a memory, then sometimes it can be an expression. Check if that expression is true or false. So if it's an expression, for example, if you are writing a program to check if a number entered is even or not, then you can write the expression for finding the even. So you just find the modulus. Then in there, so we just find the modulus of that number. So the results of that expression is what we write our cases to check if the result is that. If the result is that, then we have to do that. If it is not, then we have to do that. So it says case is followed by one of the possible values for the text expression and a column. Okay. So one of the possible values, all of them will have case. So if it's like in case of this, then you do that. In case that, you do that. So after the case, we have a column. Then you implement what it should do. Then you put in break. So the break make it that if, for example, if this is the code you are writing for our year, so you can ask the user to enter the year the year is. So the user enters. So the switch, you use a keyword switch. Then the comparison expression. So here you pass in your year. Okay. So if you are checking for even, then it's going to be modulos we use percentage. So if you are checking if a number is even or not, then that one is going to be the modulus 2. So we check the result. If the result is 0, we know it is even. Then anything else, we know it is odd. So, but in this one, we are checking the year. So we pass in the year as our value of the expression. So now we do the cases, all the possible cases for that value. So in case the value is 1, so like it says after case, then the value, then we have the column. Then you write your syntax after your column. So in case the value is 1, we just have to put that freshman. Now we need to break so that it doesn't get to the other part of your code. So once you finish with the case, you need to break so that it doesn't get to the other part of your code. So you put break there. Now in case it is 2, you just display on the screen this, then you put break there so that it doesn't get to this part. Then in case it is 3, we write our code, then we put break there so it doesn't go here. In case it's 4, we write our code, then we put break there so it doesn't go here. Then the default means if it's none of the above, so the default is similar to the else. Okay, so if none of the at the top didn't match any of them, then you run what you put as a default. So in the default, we just display that invalid here because it's none of what we are expecting. Okay. So the default, you have default, then column, then you can write your code, your block of code. Okay. So implement this as well. You ask the user to enter the year, then use a switch to display whether it is the person is a freshman, is a sophomore, is a junior, is a senior, or if user enter any other than 1, 2, 3, 4, then you tell the user invalid year. So this you can do or you should do. Okay. So I'm going to pull that of the one to check if a number is even or not. So I'm going to pull that one. So this has been done for you. So you just modify it by just taking the year from the user. Then you do this one. Then you run your code to check just to validate. You can change it. Okay. You can also do level 100, level 200, level 300, level for the final year before anything else is invalid. So just play with that code. So I'm going to do that of the whether value is an even value or not. So I'm going to into this index. I'm going to declare this one to be normal. And we are checking if it's even or not. I'll leave one of the displays or change it. I'll change it to enter number. My number is in, so it's up there. So we are using our switch. Here we are using switch. So after you have your value from now the comparison, you want to use switch. So here we have switch. Then in this case, the expression is going to be the expression to check if the modulus is 0 or not. So if it is, so we have no, we say how to find modulus. It's the number, percentage, the type of module you want to show percentage to. So we are finding the number modulo 2 of that number. Okay. Then we check, so we use the case. The case will check the results, which the value. This one return the value of this. So we check the value of this expression we have here. So if the value is 0, it means this is uneven. So case 0 is 0. Then we have our. So if it is case 0, we just write our term dot out dot print. Okay. So our number, then we bring it to our the number entered. Then our test is even. Okay. So the else will be the default. So any other result, we are going to put it in the default, which means it is not 0. Anything which is not 0. So number plus s out. Okay. Then remember, you need to break so that it doesn't get to this part of it. Once it doesn't get to the other part, so you break it. Have a break, but all the top cases should have a break. So once you've done that, you just run your code. Okay, so enter a number. So let's say I enter 4. So like you see, it says 4 is even. So I run it again and enter 5. So I enter 5. 5 is out. Okay. So that's it. So that's the switch. So you can directly use the memory name over here so that you use the case to check its value. You can have an expression over here. So then you check the result of the expression. So in this case, the result is either 0 or something else. So if it's 0, it is even. So you just display it is even and you break. And anything else goes to the default. Default is like the else. Then you just display it. Okay. Now if it's true or false, if this expression returns true or false true, then you also in case true, then you write the syntax. Then default can be, then it means it else. The default, then we display your result over here. Okay. So that's it for today about the if the conditional statement. So I'm going to go over briefly what we've done. Then I didn't know that. I wrote the code for you. Okay. But I use a switch, so you will use the if statement. Since I've done the switch one for you, use the if statement to solve this, write this program for checking if my number is even or odd. So I've done that for switch, using the switch statement. So you try to use what the if statement to accomplish that task. Okay. So that is the assignment for the week. So I'm going to go over. So the conditional statement, we use the if statement. So in the if statement, if it's just one comparison, we just use if, then the action will be there. Then what you are comparing will be at the right. Then what you are comparing to. So we have two things we are comparing to. So choose that one. Okay. So if something on the memory, then it means we want to check if what is on the memory is equal to what you have over here. So in case it is that, then if it's true, you write the code to be executed if it is true. Then if it is false, you also write the code to be executed if it is false. So if it's two comparison, then that's either true or false. Then we have if, then the condition, then else. Then they also put the code. If the top one is false, what should be executed? Now, if it's three or more, we have if. Then the next one is else if. Then if it's more than three, we have else if, else if, else if, and the last one is going to be else, which means if none of the top one, matches, then the else will be executed. Okay. So in this program, which we haven't talked about it, it says write a program which asks the user to enter age. If the user enters age, then if your program should alert the user you are eligible to drink, which means that if the age the user enters is 18 and above, you tell the user that it's eligible. Any other age, you tell the user it is not, which means below 18, you tell the user that it is not qualified to drink. Okay. So in this, since we get the input from the user, we import our java.util class. Now, display we tell the user to enter the age, but before that, because we need the memory to save the input from the user, you need to declare the variable to reserve that memory. Then age normally we don't have fractions of age or decimals of age, so it's supposed to be integer, so you declare it as int, then the name of your memory you've given it to a variable is going to be age. Okay, so this reserves a space on the memory and you call it age. Now you get the input from the user, you put that value on that memory. So this gets the input from the user. It is next int because that is an integer. The memory we are storing the value inside is an integer data type, so we need to call next int. So we have our scanner object, then dot our next int method. So this takes the value from the user and store it on the memory where we name age over there. Now in the comparison, you have to check the value inside that memory. So if the value in the memory is greater than or equal to 18, so that's a condition. So the memory name comes here, and the comparator is greater than or equal to. That's what it says. 18 and above, it says you can drink. Any other thing below says you are not qualified. So if this is greater or equal to 18, we just display that you are eligible to drink. Then else means you didn't meet the top one, so you are not eligible to drink. Then the nested if means if in an if statement. Okay, so we did agree to. So this one will be the top one will be if followed by else if, then else will be over here. Okay. Now if you want to check if the number is greater than 100, then we say score cannot be greater than 100, then that one will be here. Okay, so that one is going to be greater than, not greater than or equal to, greater than 100, then you display your error message, then else if, then below 52, you check if it is below 0, which is negative, then you display score cannot be negative, then else means it's more, not less than 0, then you also display that the grade is C. Okay. So you can modify that code too. Then we come to the nested if, which means an if in another if. So in the mobile money one that we do, if you enter an option and there's another option there, then you can also implement the selection option also there. So you have another if in another if statement. So you can also do it as your personal project as well. Then we talk about the switch. So the switch, we have the switch keyword, then the expression comes here. It's just a value of the value. If it's an expression, the result of the expression is what we use for the case. So you check each of the results for all the possible cases. Then if it's none of the case you expect, you put it in the default. But remember, each of the case should have a break so that it doesn't go to the next line of code. So break means just quit over here and exit my switch block. So if it matches here, this means quit the block and exit. So exit over there. that's the break. So remember, in the case, always remember to bring the break in each of the cases. The default doesn't have a break, so anything of that verb default, none of that verb, the default will be executed. Okay, so thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day. And if you want to contact me, you have to go to the home page of the this course. Then you can send me a message. But first, you need to log in. Now, if you have any challenge or if you have any contribution or you've written a particular code that is not relating to the content, remember you don't have to post the assignment solution so that if others say it will not motivate them to do their own assignment. So you can post anything other than the solution to the assignment. So if written a code for this concept or for this knowledge, you can share with us in the comment box. So if you had an idea of using the if statement knowledge that you learned today to implement something, you can share it with us over here. Or you can as well share it when you log in, we have the public forum. First share it in the forum and select programming as the category. So when you share it, people can also see your code and also appreciate it. Okay. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.